it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it. A comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it. Comma and a comma. Gotta get it. And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next road test. I'm joined by two old friends here now. I think we've met them on the podcast recently, but they're back again. We've got Griff Holland and Ed Brown, the founders of Zedible. Hello, boys. How are you?
Hi, hey, Chris.
Hello. Morning.
Guys, why don't you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you first and how we ended up with Zedible?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Griff.
I'm Ed.
You've done that before.
And we've been in the hospitality sector for a number of years. So back in 2009, we started a quick service restaurant chain called Friska that was always sort of sustainably minded and responsibly minded. And we did okay. We raised some money. We opened up a bunch of outlets around the UK, focusing on Bristol, went to Birmingham, and then we started growing the cluster in Manchester. And then back in 2020, the world changed. And what was a very focused business plan turned into our Achilles heel, because we were basically feeding people on their lunch break, and people's lunch break turned into their kitchen fridge. And so all our customers disappeared. So I guess we're coming to this very much with like an operator's mindset, an operator's hat on. And we came to Zedible, as I said, we were always sort of sustainably minded, responsibly minded, and that sort of filtered through what we did at Friska. But we noticed that in 2021, the conversation very much was focusing on carbon, which is interesting because obviously carbon and global warming and the melting icebergs have been, in the news, an issue for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But I would say within hospitality, carbon specifically hadn't really been identified as a thing. When we started Friska, it was all about free range meats. Then it became about zero waste to landfill. Sort of following on from that, if you had any plastic in your building, you were condemning the world and every turtle to a death. And it was only in 2018 that I remember the first time that carbon was specifically mentioned at a Sustainable Restaurant Association award, which is quite an interesting observation. Anyway, COVID happened, the world changed, we come out of COVID, and we could see reading in the industry press, in Propel, that seemingly all of these, hospitality organisations, especially the larger ones, wanted to be part of the solution as opposed to the problem. And so almost on a daily basis, another organisation was signing up to a net zero target. And Ed and I had a hunch that despite the intent from the sector, no one had a clue where they were starting that journey from, and they definitely didn't have a map to get them to wherever they wanted to get to.
Yeah.
Now, the two sort of products out on the market then and still now, I would argue, were carbon accounting and carbon labelling. Now, I won't go into those points too much, but at a headline level, carbon accounting deals with spend, not what you buy. And it's what you buy that drives the carbon in your operation. So looking at it from a spend perspective simply doesn't make sense. It's like saying, I've gone to Tesco, I spent 100 quid on food, and this is my carbon figure. Now, that doesn't hold, because what you buy when you go shopping is what's driving the carbon. And it's exactly the same in a restaurant. So that doesn't hold. And then coming at it from an operator's mindset, really, we're all about delivering great customer experiences, right? And fun times with food and drink. And it's the primary function of hospitality is not to save the world, but it absolutely is going to need to play a part in that. And so what our thinking is, rather than introduce carbon labels and effectively have a load of don't buy me's on your menu, which is what it is saying if it's a high carbon dish, is saying, look, let's take the customer outside of that. They haven't come to enjoy a nice evening with you to save the world. They've come to spend some time with friends that they hopefully like, eating food that they hopefully enjoy eating. As operators, it's our responsibility to make that the most sustainable experience possible. And so Zedible absolutely puts the operators in the driving seats and makes CO2 a KPI where it matters most, which is the ingredients within a hospitality business.
I'm going to share the screen here and shift us to the side. And Ed, are you taking us through?
Yeah, I'll drive, shall I?
Yeah.
And Griff will shout. Have you picked that?
Like any taxi driver.
Okay, so what we say after the demise of Frisco, which was our first business, we are still operators. We have a small hospitality business called Double Puck that we operate. So it's a daytime sort of daytime operation in Bristol. We've got 2 sites there. So, fortunately, we were in a position where we could build this platform, with that previous experience, but actually as a live guinea pig to see what the data looks like and use that to make decisions and make stuff happen. So that's quite a sort of fortunate position to be in. So what essentially we have is we have, I think it's about 22 months or so of our own data in the platform. What we do is we take data from any purchase to pay system, which is obviously pretty common in most hospitality businesses of any kind of size, because it's it might be driving costings, it might be driving allergens, it might be driving all sorts of stuff. But it's a cost control piece as much as anything. So we take this data, and I guess basically we've created a way to sort of ingest this, for want of a better word, but to do it at scale. And I think that's what's quite unique. So we do all that heavy lifting, and so our clients have the platform populated with the data to see what's going on and to make
And you can apply this to any business, right? It doesn't matter if I'm an enterprise business with 5,000 sites or if I'm Double Puck with 2 sites.
Exactly, because we look at it as long as there's that data piece there, in terms of that formal sort of structured way that purchasing data is collected. That's fine, because everyone is really, very few clients need and are wanting to look at a portfolio approach.
Yeah,
it's still looking at that top level, top co kind of thing, which we think is makes a lot of sense. We can do a portfolio view, but we generally recommend starting at that top level. So we pull that data in and we run it through an algorithm to do this matching process with a database of fully lifecycle assessed products. So that's like land use impact, agricultural production, fertilizer use, blah blah blah, transport, all the way through to it landing at the front door. So that is how we do that. So what we are seeing with this yellow column here is the CO2 originating from our food and drink purchases month by month. So bearing in mind that 90% of the carbon is in scope 3.
Yeah.
And scope 3, category 1, which get a bit sort of detailed, is goods and services. So basically, Cat 1 scope 3 is what we nail. That's what we focus on. We don't look at scopes 1 and 2. There are lots of people we know that could do that really well.
And when you talk to brands, do they have that understanding of Cat 1 scope 3? Do they get it, or is that an education piece for you?
I'd say it is an education piece. What I would credit with this is the Zero Carbon Forum did a really detailed bit of work. I can't remember exactly when it came out, probably 2020 or 21, which went through pub, brewery sector, restaurants, quick service, etc., to sort of say this is what it looks like. What's the art of the possible, etc., etc. And it's a really good report. And I think us seeing that really was a moment to say, wow, when it's quantified in that way, this is where it's at. But why is no one looking at this? And I guess that's where
that's why you're here.
What inspired us to do it. So we can see in our little business, we're about $1 million revenue roughly across the 2 sites, that we generated 13.7 tons of carbon in June. We generated 10.5 tons in May, and 8.7 tons in April. So that is information that I don't think really, we haven't come across any client that's got it.
Well, I've never seen it. I've never seen that in all my years.
It's relevant, right? It's really, really important. Now, and interestingly, is the only time we've had an outright mass reduction is when Omicron came around, which is this gap here.
Yeah.
When our sales dropped off a cliff. So, if any brand that has an aspiration to grow, carbon is probably going to go one way. You can see it, by eye. You've got our revenue in the sort of purple bars here, but there is stuff you can do. So when we, look at the next level of detail, which is carbon intensity. So this is one divided by the other, basically. So we can see that in June, we generated that 13.7 tons of carbon, and our carbon intensity was 110 grams for every £1 of revenue we generated net of VAT. So you can see by eye, it's actually going down.
Yeah.
Revenue's fortunately been going up. Intensity's been coming down. So, we're not on a mass rollout at all. That isn't our aspiration for the business. But if we were, and we open 10 more sites, but we can hold that intensity, then that's quite significant because we're operating at a much more efficient level from a carbon perspective.
And I was going to say, how much effort are you, you might get to this in a minute, but how much effort are you having to put in to deliver that result? As in operationally?
Not much, in a good way. It is, we'd be kidding ourselves if we said for operators, this is the primary thing. They've got other things to focus on, obviously, just in terms of the core metrics of, labour and stuff like that. But the idea is because you have this platform populated with the data, when you do think, right, this quarter we're going to look at one product, we're going to look at one thing and try and push that through to make a gain around carbon, then that's what it's there to do, and then see the impact of it. So, we definitely see it as a secondary platform, but really important and, light touch in the best possible way. So what we can see is this red line is where we would have been tracking based on some total output, but because we've made changes, and that is what intensity is, that is the manifestation of changes we decide to make from a purchasing perspective coming to fruition there. And I guess that is where sometimes, we can be a bit critical, I guess, about the carbon labelling outfits, just because from an operator's perspective, it's only relevant if it's showing a material impact on carbon.
Yeah.
Unless I can see my intensity going down from what I'm doing, then sort of what's the point?
Well, no, and you said at the start, this is the measure, right? This is the yardstick of whether you're having an impact or not. Yeah.
So anyway, ours is all about impact and a pragmatic approach to that. And this is what we have here. So essentially, we can see that our benchmark period, so that's obviously includes seasonality and all those other, things that move through the month of the trading. Our benchmark year, which for us was October 21 to September 22, we generated 120 grams of carbon per pound of revenue. We have done stuff, which we can talk about later on, and we got it down by about 15% without impacting revenue or customer experience or hitting margin. And we're now running at 103 for the period after that. So we've averted 51.5 tons of carbon from the atmosphere because of what we've done, and that's the delta between the green and the red line.
And is it possible to link, if you're depending on the actions you take to drive this number, is it possible to link that to cost control as well? If you know what I mean, so you can get a double win.
Yeah, definitely, 100%, and that's I'll come on to that in a bit because that's what we think is really exciting. Yeah, I guess that's where.
Sorry, jumping ahead.
No, because that is, cool. We come at it again from this pragmatic view, but that's where it can get scale, right? If you get very few people who are willing to sacrifice margin in pursuit of low carbon.
Yeah.
Where it can get traction at a system-wide level is when you can get a win in both for both carbon, for the planet and the bottom line. That's what we think is key. I won't spend too long here because it's a nice colourful graphic. Basically shows the breakdown by category, by month. You can cut it and sort of deep dive, and then you get 100% stats. You can see the proportionality. So I won't spend too long on that because it's sort of self-explanatory. Period to date is sort of from October 21 to June 23 for us. 184 tons of carbon. We don't really push the offsetting because we think actually it should be in the operational, improvement and efficiency. Yeah. If a client wants to offset, then and you want to say, right, let's offset the meat, and 28 tons done. You know what you should be doing. Um, going down to the next level, which looks a bit less exciting, but it holds a lot of valuable information. One is around like your supplier base and which suppliers are driving carbon. And this is basically the aggregate, volume of all of the products you buy by supplier, linked by the emissions factor, which is that referencing that life cycle data set. And that's what's showing you which are your biggest emitters. And I think a lot of, companies might find that quite surprising, actually, which one's driving it. It's, for us, for example, it's not actually our butchers, because we don't buy a huge amount of meat in our business. And what I guess we want to try and see more is these suppliers that are going the extra mile. They are maybe investing in EVs and PVs on the roof and biomass boilers and all sorts of clever things that people are doing. There's a couple of breweries, I think, in the UK. One's based in Bristol, Wiper and True, have put a thing to capture CO2 through the production and then use that to carbonate the drinks. Like, brilliant. Like, all that kind of stuff. What we see is it's a platform to deep dive that operation and see how those companies look, because there might be a way to apply like a coefficient to all those products because you're buying from a best-in-class supplier. It'll probably require some investment from a consultant, someone that's a real, to do that piece of work, because that isn't our business. But what we can do is reflect that, and I guess it's to try and see a rise to the top of best-in-breed suppliers who are sort of living and breathing this idea around moving the dial on carbon reduction. On the product side, this is like materiality, and this is what we think is absolutely key. So if you'd asked us before we had this platform in place, what is the top 3 emitting products, we'd have probably said chicken and sausages and bacon. Yeah. It's actually coffee, milk, and cheese. That's where it's been at. And I think that's really surprising. And I think I think a lot of people would be quite surprised about that. Now, we are a daytime cafe, but we do sell food. So, but it's all in there in the data. And I think people can get quite hung up on specifics. It's like, but where do I buy my, carrots from? I want to know about my carrots because I get them from down the road. We buy 100 kilos of carrots a week or something in our business. It's a lot from weight, but because the low emission factor on a carrot, it's not in our top 100. So, we won't ever bother to sort of investigate that to see, to run an analysis of
what's carrots doing. Yeah.
Right. But if we were a bigger business and you look at, milk or say coffee, for example, you might say, well, okay, this is a generic figure. It covers a full life cycle assessment, but on a generic basis. Let's now move from generic to specific. Again, engage a consultant to do that piece of work, and then what we can do is reference that going forward. So again, you can improve the data integrity over time, but based on materiality, I guess is the key.
Yeah, because you can measure that journey, right? From the minute I query the big drivers, basically, and do some more digging, then you can reflect what's going to happen on the back end of that.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'll go.
If I can just jump in. Sure. I think from a user perspective, whether it's someone that's leading on ESG and climate sort of sustainability measures in a business, or even the staff that work in a business, what this does is it crystallizes what is driving the carbon in a business, and then gives very specific, easily identifiable, actionable things to look at and change that will tangibly and materially move the dial. So I think last time we had our podcast, you talked about a one napkin policy for.
Yes. I knew you were going to bring that up, but yeah.
Which is classic if you don't know what to look for. Yeah. But there's no way at Double Puck we're going to be talking about napkins when we can see that coffee and milk are the biggest drivers of carbon in our business. So if we want to actually move the dial on anything, just do look at those 2 things and you're going to have a huge impact. I think part of the problem it is a problem in ESG and sustainability is that it feels such a huge problem that we're trying to solve and almost impenetrable that the easiest thing to do is talk about one napkin.
Yeah, because that's the one they've sat in a boardroom and physically said, what can we just do that is so visual And
exactly.
yeah.
It's something. Whereas this gives you the materiality of specifically for your business, and then you can start to enact change. And that once you're on that journey, everything's a journey nowadays. So once you're on that journey, is a really, really motivating thing. Because like Ed said, we've dropped carbon intensity by 15%, more than 15% at Double Puck within 7 months. You know, that compares to other operators' 7-year sustainability plan. Exactly, and in a completely achievable way. So at Double Puck, you can see here, before Ed moves on to the sandbox, you know, the second biggest driver of carbon at Double Puck was full fat milk. Now, semi-skimmed milk has got 22, 23% less carbon per litre or per kilo than full fat milk.
And who cared?
Hey?
Who cared when you switched from? Did you switch then from full fat to semi?
Yeah. We switched, but the process was not just carbon, because it can't just be carbon. It's customer. How does it taste? How does it compare? Does it stack up? If yes, tick. Let's move forward. How does cost compare? If it's, you know, if it's twice the price, then you're not going to do it necessarily. Unless it's a hell of a game and the customer's willing to pay.
Yeah.
But that worked. Ed's going to come onto it in the sandbox. But, you know, that was one of the things that significantly moved the dial for us. And it was easy. It was easy and it was impactful. And it brought together carbon, customer, and cost. And unless those three things are in the same lens, I think so many ESG strategies and plans are just not going to come to fruition, because those are the core of any business.
And what a great message to send to your people as well, right? Not just about internal marketing or external marketing, but what a great message to send to your people. If you say, you imagine you're one of the big boys, right? And you've got 100, 200 sites, whatever it might be. And you say, look, we're changing this product for this reason. We've checked it out. We've done we've checked with some customers who've rolled out in 2 sites already. Now we're going to roll out across 100. Look at the impact it's going to have on your bottom line in your restaurant. So it's going to be a benefit to you there, but also look what we're doing for the planet. And I just wonder, I mean, I'm surprised why I'm not hearing more about it, but I'm sure we might, right? So
I think we will, you know, and we always read about how people that are younger than the three of us.
Thanks for putting me in your bracket. I appreciate it.
Are driven by purpose as well as the pocket, you know. And actually, I think that does, you know, old dogs like us a disservice, because I think, you know, good people are driven by purpose as well. And actually, to feel that, you know, your company is doing something to be part of the solution is a really motivating thing.
I just inspire your people. I mean, I know it doesn't link to, but retention in people and
all of that stuff,
and all the problems that everyone's having with all this stuff. This is another retention tool. This is telling people, look, we're good people. We're actually doing the right thing when our competitors aren't, right? And I'm not saying that people should throw it out like that, but I think it's crucial. I just think we're missing a trick. I think you mentioned conscious consumerism, which I've tried to say when I'm drunk, which is really difficult. But you mentioned that on our podcast, and it's absolutely key, right? It's not just about customers deciding where they shop. It's actually about employees deciding where they work as well. And I think it's crucial. But anyway, sorry, I haven't seen the sandbox. This is exciting. I haven't seen this.
Yes, it's a new feature launched a couple of months ago. So this is essentially where you simulate outcomes from a commercial or and a carbon perspective. So what you do is you select a date range. I'll show you some save ones in a minute just to save a bit of time. But you go and select the date range that you're looking at, and then say, right, okay, I can see then the materiality there for that exact date range. Obviously, milk has dropped down in terms of the impact for us because we moved over semi-skimmed. So you might say, right, go for this product, and then this is what we're going to look at, putting into the sandbox and run some outcome scenarios on. So if I just go to a couple of saved ones. So I did this one the other day. I did a little video actually on LinkedIn about it. So this is one we're considering. So we make a load of cookies in ours. It's one of our sort of signature products, hence the name Double Puck. And, there are some great plant-based butters. I mean, some of them have been around for years, but there's some new ones that have come out that perform really, really well. So we will do a taste test. We will do MPD. But what I wanted to see is, well, based on what our actual volumes last 12 months, so July to June, what would it look like if we did this based on what we think we can buy the product for and what we buy butter for? And that's a 400 quid cost of sales saving, 442 kilos. And so, you can quantify that cost of sale impact in CO2. Now, we're 1 million revenue. If we're 10 million or 100 million, then suddenly these are some massive, massive cost saving things.
Just a no-brainer. I just think, yeah.
Like the platform is paid for many, many, many times over just on the cost of sales saving.
Yeah.
It's a rounding error. If you attribute the true cost of carbon, which a lot of the literature puts it at about $100 a ton, and you add that into the ROI mix, then it's off the charts. So there's a real opportunity. I'll show you another one, which is one we did, which was the whole milk for semi-skim. So we looked at like the year of 2022, negligible improvement on margin because they're basically the same price, but 1% a ton of carbon. And when you have got no impact on the revenue or the customer experience, but you can shave a ton off the carbon for doing not very much, then brilliant. We still have full fat milk in sort of 2 litre containers on request, but our primary one, which sits in these sort of 13 litre Pergol things, is now semi-skim. So complete win-win.
It's like your like a temperature test, isn't it? To say, look, if we did this, would it work? And then internally you check with the customer, right? Well, on a smaller scale, obviously. And
some other customers that we've done this for, some of the savings can be huge. There was a customer that they spent about 115k a month, about 600 different products they purchased. I could look at it and look at 5 different products, and this isn't just saying, okay, don't sell fillet steak, don't sell that, don't sell that, because for this client that was a non-negotiable. But look at just down the list a bit, only 5 SKUs, and they could save 4.5k a month and reduce their carbon by 15%.
Wow.
If they push those through. And again, you don't do those all in one go, but do, one a quarter would be great. And you should see, if it's material, CO2 intensity come down, hopefully revenue goes up, stays the same at least, and you're making a positive impact. So that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, just to add one point, which Ed sort of reminded me there. We've talked about saving carbon, we've talked about saving cost. The other key thing, though, is driving sales. Now, especially when you're talking about the contract catering world, carbon and ESG is becoming more and more like a KPI that contract caterers are having to report on and fulfill for their end clients. And at the moment, just like the rest of the sector, their eyes are closed. And so with something like Zedible, they're going to be able to quantify that, report that to their clients, and in our view, gain business, win work, win new clients, because they can show how they are moving the dial, and others can't because they're not reporting on it. And so
I mean, I've sat in contract negotiations before for with Compass actually back in the day, and you have to. There's a lot of proof in the pudding you require. The numbers alone are great, but they do obviously you've got, because often it's the facilities manager's requirement that he needs to tick some boxes and needs to achieve some stuff as well out of the contract. So I think you're dead right. I think that it's a differentiator.
Yeah, and we've used that ourselves in a contract situation, having a data point where everyone else just says stuff. We're doing this.
But
that's, and it's not to say that stuff's bad at all, but a data point will always win, hands down.
It's great. I mean, look, I really appreciate you, because we try and make this content as short as we can to enable people to have a quick look into Zedible world. And I think you guys, I mean, you proved it with Frisker, and you're doing it again with this, that actually you do care, and it's beyond that right now, because you have something that can measure and move the needle, which I think is fantastic. And if people want to get hold of you and just want to go direct to you, how do they get you?
Ed at zedible.io or Griff at zedible.io. Get in touch with us. Got a website.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on the road test. This will be on the website, on social, and everywhere else, so everyone can get engaged with it. That's great, and I shall see you both soon.
Great.
Cheers,
Cheers,
Chris.
guys.
Cheers.